Hey, everyone. It's Jenny Fenig welcoming you to another fantastic episode of Coach Magic. We are still deep into our Luminary series, and we have an incredible luminary with us today. Please join me in welcoming Tess Waresmith to the show. Let me tell you about Tess. She is an investing educator, a speaker, and founder of Money Confident Club, a financial education community that helps women learn how to grow their money using simple investing strategies so that they can retire comfortably and live life on their terms. After losing thousands in investing mistakes in her 20s, Tess learned everything she could about wealth building and built her net worth from zero to $1 million as a single 35-year-old woman. She's been featured in full-length articles on CNBC and Business Insider, and is a regular investing expert on Fox 5 New York and Boston 25. Welcome to Coach Magic, Tess.
Thank you so much for having me, Jenny. I'm thrilled to be here.
We're going to have a good time. Okay, y'all. So before we get into this conversation about money and investing, Tess and I were chatting a bit in our little pre-show gathering. I was telling Tess I'm really excited because I'm about to go on a cruise. And I'm a big cruiser. We love Royal Caribbean. That is our main line that we cruise on. And Tess shared with me that she used to work on Royal Caribbean as an aerial acrobat. Tess, tell us more about that part of your life. That just sounds so interesting.
Thank you. It was interesting is the right word. I ended up with that job, honestly, because I graduated into a recession in 2008, and I had been a high-level competitive springboard diver, a Division I scholarship athlete. And after I retired, I knew the Olympics wasn't in my future. And I sort of thought that would be it for me in diving. And I was very grateful to get a full ride to school. And I thought that would kind of be it. And then I couldn't find a job at all. And so I graduated with a business degree. I thought I was going to go work on Wall Street or something cool. And my coach called me and said, hey, they're looking for NCAA Olympic level divers for this aqua show on cruise ships. And at first I said, no, like, I'm too good for that. I just got a college degree. Like, I'm going to go into like finance. And then I couldn't find a job. So 30 days later, I called him back and said, hey, is that job still available? And it ended up being the best decision I ever made. I cruised for 3 years, went to Europe, mostly Caribbean and Alaska, but honestly just met the most wonderful people. I got to get paid to flip around. It was just incredible. And being a serious athlete in college, it was a nice opportunity for me to do what I love, but have a lot of fun doing it. So yeah, I will never forget that. Very grateful for that time.
And I bet it was probably just a nice break from being evaluated and scored. I mean, obviously you have to do good work, but I have kids one who was a former gymnast, she's no longer competing, but those scores and every time you're getting, I feel like that's kind of intense. And then you got to have this time where you just had fun.
Yeah, exactly that. And I would also say it completely changed my perspective on career paths and opportunities. And I graduated college thinking I was going to go work for a Fortune 500 company and climb the ladder for 30 years. And that was my plan. And that was the only path I saw as success. And working on the cruise ship, I met so many people. I learned so many things. And I don't know if I would be an entrepreneur today if it weren't for that, because after I left, I wanted to work at smaller companies. I wanted to have a different kind of experience, and I valued connection and community more than the prestige of a Fortune 500 company. After that, it was such a unique experience. So it did change a lot of things for me.
Yeah, your whole trajectory got shifted. And what prompted you to say, okay, my time on cruise ships is finished. It's time for the next chapter. Walk us through that.
I had a lot of injuries as an athlete. I was a gymnast from the time I was 5 until 12, and then I did diving for another 10 years after that. So I had a lot of injuries. I stopped performing in the high diving and acrobatic show, and I still worked on Royal helping people navigate the ports of calls. I was actually what's called a shopping guide. So I would help people find what they were looking for in the ports of call. And honestly, that was a funny job because it's very jewelry focused, and I knew nothing about jewelry. So it was a good lesson on, getting out of your comfort zone. But after I had been on ships for 3 years, I honestly just didn't feel like I had anywhere to go. And that lifestyle it's really fun, but you also give up a lot of your freedom. For 6 months at a time, you have to be back at the ship at 3 p.m. before it takes off. You have a day off in Fort Lauderdale where our ship was docked on the weekend. So it's incredibly interesting, but it's a completely different lifestyle. And I was just ready to get a land job after being on that kind of schedule and not really living anywhere for 3 years either. I lived on the ship for 6 months, and then I would travel for a few months, which was awesome. But that got old for me after a few years.
Yeah. So then you said, okay, I'm going to get a job. So where did you go next?
So then I moved to Utah with my boyfriend at the time that I had met on cruise ships. And I was looking for a job in marketing, and I ended up working for this really fun company that put on color runs. Do you remember those 5Ks where they would like throw chalky color at you? Yes. It was a fad like 10, 15 years ago now. So I worked for one of those companies that was pretty successful, and it was great because it was very small. So I got to learn all different types of marketing. I even got to host some of the races as well. And some of these races were 10,000 people. So I got even more comfortable on a mic doing that, which was super fun, hosting like sexiest man competitions. It was a blast. And so that was the first job I got off once I got on land, was in marketing. And then I stayed in marketing in a few different roles for the next really 10, 15 years until a few years ago when I went full time with this business.
Okay. All right. So you were working for other companies. You were getting a lot of experience. That is one benefit from working at a smaller company, is you kind of wear a lot of hats. You have full divisions, And then what prompted you to decide to go out on your own and create this company that's focused on investing and helping women be better with money?
Yeah. So I was working at the time that I started to focus on financial education. I was working at a marketing agency that had been, like you said, a really great experience for me. And I was there for almost 8 years by the time I left. And when I joined, the company was around 30 people, and I believe it was over 400 when I left. And so that was another great experience because I got to do all these different things, but there wasn't really anywhere for me to go. I wanted to be on the C-suite. They didn't really have that as an opportunity. And the CEO was a really great guy who sort of said, look, like, I'll help you find something else if you want, but you've been teaching people on the side the basics of investing in finance. And he kind of encouraged me. He's like, maybe you should go try that. And the reason I had started doing that was honestly as a grief project. So 3 years prior, my stepdad, who was my closest family member, I have a lot of trauma in my family. And so he was a real source of stability for me. And he went into hospice. And so for months, I was sort of sitting next to him, reading and really starting to learn more about the gender wealth gap and how, yes, there's a gender pay gap, but we also have this massive disconnect in women's confidence and ability to build wealth through investing. And as somebody that had gone through my own self-education, I had actually hired a financial advisor in my 20s that made a lot of bad decisions on my behalf. And I had lost thousands of dollars already. So I was very motivated and interested to learn more about this topic because I had gone through it. I had learned really simple investing strategies myself. I was investing in real estate. And I just realized all the stuff that I had learned and implemented was so much easier than I thought it would be. And I wanted to share that knowledge. And so I started doing that. Once he passed away, I was just sort of trying to find something to fill every second of free time so I didn't have to think about anything. And so that's how it started. So it started as a side project, and then I did not intend to create a business, but now I can't really imagine doing anything else because it feels like a moral obligation to help as many women as possible, especially now that I've been doing this for a while and I've met so many wonderful, brilliant, incredible women. that are so intimidated by their money that they're leaving thousands on the table or not taking the steps they need to be successful. And it's honestly heartbreaking. So that's why I'm here, and that's what I want to change. And the good news is it's easier for most of us than we think it's going to be.
Boom. Okay. Love that. And thank you for sharing about your stepfather, how blessed you are to have had him in your life and have this really powerful relationship, and that piece around trauma. I have found from my own work, myself, and then the clients that I have been serving for all these years, is that's often a piece that inspires the work that we do. And that's honestly the gift of trauma. That's the gift right there. And if we're willing to work through it, and it's a lot, and it's not easy, but just my own experience, the death of my sister when I was very young still is a motivator for me. I was just sharing that story this week with a new group of clients I kicked off with. And my whole thing is I want us, when we get to the end, to say, I did it. I did it. I did what I came here to do. And I heard you say, this is what I'm here for. And so I'm here for what I'm doing. I'm here for helping women like, this is what I'm here for. And you're doing it, Tess. All right. So let's talk about money. Let's talk about investing. So what can you share with our audience that you feel like not a lot of women know, and this is the stuff that can just get them wiser and more confident about money? How do you suggest that we get started here?
So the first thing that I always open presentations with is some thoughtful background on why so many of us feel intimidated by money in the first place.
Right.
Because there is so much self-blame and shame when we say things like, I'm in debt, or I don't know how to invest, or I'm not good with money, or I just keep putting this off. It's overwhelming. And all of those are reasonable outcomes of the fact that there's no formalized education around one of the most important parts of our lives, that the financial industry itself is really great at making things more complicated than it needs to be, and assaulting us with financial jargon. To be honest, it sounds dramatic, but if you've ever tried to Google a financial term, usually you find yourself 14 Google tabs deep and you can't remember what term you originally Googled, right? And so there's no formalized education. We have an industry that thrives off our lack of knowledge. The less we know, the more we can be taken advantage of. And that's not everyone. There's some wonderful people in the financial industry, of course, but there's two sides. And then the last thing I would say is that we don't really talk about money. We don't talk about salaries. We don't talk about debt. You're much more likely to get together with your friends and talk about your sex life than, how you're trying to pay off debt, or you want to learn how to invest. Those just aren't conversations that are in our mainstream yet. And they're so important. And once we can lift the lid off that and have some more candid conversations, it becomes less scary. And you start to realize, oh my gosh, a lot of my friends have a little bit of debt, or if it's not debt, have no idea what's going on with their investments or their 401ks or their IRAs or whatever it is. And so I think we spend so much time blaming ourselves in isolation that we are the only person that hasn't figured this out. And then on top of that, you've got social media with tons of people taking pictures in front of their cars and their mansions and all of this. And guess what? A lot of those people are in debt too. So it's interesting. Some of the people I work with, they're doing pretty well financially, and they'll just be like, oh, I feel so far behind. And then they'll compare themselves to somebody else. And I happen to know that other person is in a really tough spot. So it's kind of like this big secret sometimes. And so I think those are the 4 main reasons that I always want to bring up, so that you don't feel crazy that you haven't figured this thing out yet. However, so it's not your fault, right? But it is your responsibility, because the next step of this is that no one is going to guarantee your financial independence. Nobody is going to come help you. And even if you find a nice person to help you or a financial advisor, you have no way of knowing if they're really acting in your best interest unless you take a vested interest and understanding and get a little bit of education yourself. And I'm not talking about, and this is where I think there's a big misunderstanding when people are like, oh my God, like I can't learn to invest. We all learned how to drive cars. We all got our license, right? We did that without becoming a mechanic. I don't know how the engine pistons or carburetor, clearly I don't know how that works, as I'm trying to just like randomly spew off different mechanical pieces here. But I can drive a car, I can follow the rules of the road, and I have that skill and I'll have that skill forever. And when it comes to investing, there is a 101 level of investing that can give you the power to make better financial decisions and drive the car. You don't have to be the mechanic analyzing stocks, following company financials, watching Yahoo Finance news every single morning. There's basic knowledge that you can build in like weeks that can just help you make a little bit better financial decisions and can help you feel a little bit more confident with what to do with your money. And those small decisions now, especially if you're in your 30s, 40s, or even early 50s, can translate to tens of thousands of dollars more in retirement. And and that's because of the power of investing and building wealth through compound interest. And I'm happy to go into that concept. But I think those are the first two things. And then the last thing I would say is the misunderstanding that you need money to start investing. If you have a 401k or an IRA, like newsflash, you're already an investor. So you should find out how your money's invested. But also, even if you are in debt or have a lot going on, or you're a newer entrepreneur, you're not making a lot, you can invest with $5 if that's all you have. So hopefully that helps frame the conversation a bit, in the sense that we have this knowledge gap that's not really our fault, that creates a lot of shame and fear. But then the actual education to start to make huge strides is not nearly as complicated as we all believe it to be. And so that's really the narrative I want to change. Is I don't want you to like go back to school and get a degree in economics. I want you to spend like 10 minutes a day learning for a month, and it could completely change your life.
Yes. So good. Oh my gosh. All right. I'm figuring out where I want to go next from here, because I love what you said. You don't have to go back and get a degree in economics. I minored in business. I was a public relations major. Most classes I took for my business minor, I hated. This is so boring. But I had friends who were also PR majors. We had a choice at my school. You could either get an outside concentration, it was called outside in an area, and you had to have a certain number of classes, or you go for the minor, which means you needed additional. And my friend's like, you got to go for the minor. Then you get it on your thing. Well, that meant I had to take business, finance, and freaking accounting, which were my two hardest classes I took my entire time at the University of Florida. And so I think it's really important to discuss this, because if you have done any kind of education on finance and it wasn't really your language, you might have this feeling like, I hate it. It was, for me, it was so dry. It was so, my most, the enjoyable part was lining up my debits and credits so they were really tidy. You know, this was everything. Like, we didn't have laptops back then, you know? So that's what I remember. And I just remember being completely lost and confused. My dad was an accountant. He worked for the IRS for decades. And I remember calling him like, hey, why do you even do this for a job? It's the worst. And so that might follow some people into their lives now. A lot of my clients are coaches, they're consultants, they're really great communicators. But then sometimes the money part feels a little foreign and boring and dry. But you have to understand money. You have to understand how to get it to work for you, so you're not always working for it. Because even if you love what you're doing right now, age is a thing. You know, you might get to a point where you can't really work anymore, or you don't want to, because life is going to present new opportunities for you, and you want to be, you know, happily retired and living your best life doing other things. But you have to have your money working for you. So let's talk about compound interest, because this is where it's at. So educate us on compound interest and the beauty of this, Tess.
Sure. So I'll start with a misunderstanding of compound interest a little bit. Is one of the things that one of the main fears that people have about investing is that it has to be complicated and you have to like choose specific investments. And what we know about the stock market throughout history, even throughout some of the worst time periods, like the Cold War or the dot-com bubble or the 2008 financial crisis, is that the stock market fluctuates. But over time, it has only really ever gone in one direction, which is up. And that's because as the US economy continues to grow, even when things are not going so well, and I know right now is a very scary and weird time for a lot of us, the US economy continues to over time grow, not every single year, but over time. And so when you invest in the stock market, what you're doing is getting an opportunity to get a piece of all of these different companies that are growing pretty rapidly and contributing to the US economy, but also just growing themselves. And so the average return of the stock market over time is roughly 10%. That's before inflation. So obviously inflation is when things get more expensive. I think most Americans, unfortunately, are familiar with that piece. But the opportunity is that over time, if the stock market returns 10%, we have this opportunity to, on average, get our money to grow by this percentage. It's not guaranteed every year. This is just an average over a long period of time. And so what happens is when you start to contribute money, let's say you start to contribute, I'm actually going to come up with a specific example here. Let's say that you go through your money and you're like, I can probably contribute like $300 a month. The first year you do that, you're going to get, depending on what the stock market returns, let's pretend like just for argument's sake, you get like 10% every year. That's overestimating, but just for the sake of this example, at the end of that year, you would have contributed, $2,400 and you get 10% of that on top, which is great. So you get a little bit of extra money. And then the next year you continue to contribute that $300 and now you have this bigger bucket. So the interest on that bigger bucket is going to give you an even bigger return. And what happens, and this is like the math that I wish we all did in school because it's really hard to comprehend. And this is where I think everyone should pull out like a compound interest calculator. Don't try to do this math. Just Google compound interest calculator, investor.gov, and there's a really easy compound interest calculator. And so you can see like if you invested $300 a month for 30 years at a 10% return on average, you would actually only contribute about $100,000. That's the amount of money you contributed. But because you were getting that 10% return every single year, as your money was growing, you'd end up with around $600,000, which means that $500,000 of that money came from the growth of the average return of the stock market, not from you. Right. And this is the really important piece is that we focus so much on salary and making money in our businesses when we are missing out on this huge opportunity to continue to build wealth without trading more of our time for money. And so even if you only have, maybe you're starting your business, you're like, I literally only have $50 a month to do this right now. That's not going to change your life in a year. Right. But if you invested $50 over 10, 20, 30 years, you would have hundreds of thousands of dollars that you didn't actually have to make. You just were able to build that through a passive income stream. Yeah. So that's the power of compound interest. And it's really hard to even quantify if you don't really look at it. So like I said, I actually have, if you go to wealthwithtess.com/FI, I have a training on how to calculate. I have a calculator that you can use to do this. So I would encourage you to do that. But it's really important because I think most women say, I'm so far behind, I can never catch up. And compound interest is a powerful, powerful mathematical equation that can help us catch up, even if we are behind. So even if you're in your 30s or 40s or even early 50s and you haven't really started investing, you still have the opportunity to benefit from compound interest. Obviously, it's better to start as soon as possible. We all wish we could go back in time and start when we're 18 years old. Right. But alas, we are where we are. And the worst thing that happens if you start now is that you have more money than you would have had. Like that's the worst outcome, right? Right. So
you didn't start it all. Exactly. And that you are providing such a service. And I know there are people listening right now who are realizing, okay, I've got to do this. I'm going to do this. I wish I could remember her name, but she's coming into my brain right now because she was kind of like my version of Tess. When I had my first corporate job, I did do the corporate job route. And I think we graduated at different times. It was the heyday. I had a lot of different job opportunities and it was great. And so I worked for a big public relations agency and I had, these Fortune 500 clients and I was global travel and the whole thing. And I worked with the woman who was about 10 years older than me. And she was also an actress. I mean, that was really her dream. And it was tricky in New York. It doesn't always work out. So she was working in PR while also, taking acting gigs. And she said to me, invest in your 401k. And I was like, I'm making $28,000 a year. I'm barely eating. Okay. I'm scrounging leftover client sandwiches. Okay. In the lunchroom. And she goes, I don't care. Just don't even think about that it's coming out of your paycheck. You need to do it. And I listened and it wasn't that much. It was a couple hundred, but it was painful at the time because literally it was like down to my final $50 or something before my next payday, because I was also having a lot of fun in New York. Let's be real. So, but it was such a great tip. It was such a great tip that she told me that, and I listened. I trusted her, and I've been an investor ever since. And you get those statements, and sometimes it's like, what? I lost money. But like Tess said, over time, it's a win. It just, the data is there. The numbers are there to back it up. And you really have to think like that. You can't just get locked into, well, this is my salary. This is what I'm making, because some people make a ton of money. I actually read a book years ago. What was it? The Millionaire Next Door. I don't know if you ever read it.
It's a great book.
Yes.
Yeah, great book.
A lot of those people with the fancy cars and the this and the that, they don't have much to their name except that fancy car. And it's the people who are driving the vehicles that don't look so fancy that are much wealthier.
Yeah. And I think the point about a salary is good, especially if you're newer in business or you don't have a 6-figure salary, or you're not making 6 figures in your business or whatever. You don't need that much money to invest. And I think that's like the biggest myth, is we think we have to wait until we get to a certain time. Mm-hmm. And I started investing similar to you. I was making like 40 grand a year. The majority of, I'm 37 years old, 30. Yeah, I'm 37 years old.
10 years on you. Okay.
So I'm 37 years old. More than half of my wealth at this point in my life, and I started investing 12 years ago, is from investing. It's not from my salary. It's not from my business. It's because I really strategically, I realized the power of investing, and I took a portion every time I got paid. And it started small. At first, it was 3% of what I was getting paid. And then over time, as I was able to make more and reduce my expenses, it became more and more. So it really is incredibly important that people understand that it's not that rich people invest. Investing is how you become a wealthier person, and making those conscious decisions to maybe drive the Toyota and invest the delta of a $400 payment if you would have gotten a fancier car. That one decision, that's a multi-$100,000 decision right there, right? Like that is the importance of understanding the power of compound interest, is because you can weigh decisions against that and say, okay, is this big purchase that I'm going to make, is this worth it? Is this going to add value and fulfillment to my life more than the potential to retire years earlier? And that's really the questions that we need to be asking ourselves, and why it's so important that, again, even if you're allergic to math, or this conversation is already making you nervous, that is a sign that you need to learn this as soon as possible, because you can start making better financial decisions. And the honest important thing to understand is that when you start doing this, you're not going to be a millionaire next year, right? Or maybe you already are, but you're not going to build $1 million of wealth really quickly, but you're going to get so many more important things right away, like peace, understanding, clarity, and you'll know how to get on the path to eventually reach financial independence, or even just financial flexibility, the ability to pivot if you want. That's such a gift. That's the gift of really taking ownership of your finances and getting a little bit of an education.
Yes, absolutely. And it's so critical that women realize that we can speak the language of money. We are allowed to know about this. We are allowed to ask great questions. We are allowed to have it. And Tess, I mean, it wasn't so long ago that we really couldn't. We couldn't have a credit card in our name. It was the 1970s that became possible.
Yeah.
We couldn't really own property. It was our fathers or our husbands. And so this is new. And I think it's important to have that conversation too. Men have had a big jump start.
Sure. Yeah.
Big jump start. So that's a piece of it too, is we almost had this permission. So like, I don't get it. You almost like, I don't need to know it, but we do need to know it. It's our responsibility. And I think, I'm a mother, and so I've got kids to think about and also show them. I don't want to be afraid of money. It can bring up a lot of emotions for people. I think you touched on it with the shame, or you just feel stupid, or you feel like you should be further along. And then to your point, the whole people not talking about, why can't we talk about money? Why can't we talk about money? But some of us were told, we might have grown up in families. I know lots of people who grew up in families. We don't talk about that. That's not classy to talk about that. That's not whatever. I remember my first job, that one where I was told by my colleague, start investing in that 401k. The first time I got a raise, Tess, I went in knowing, hey, I need to have this amount. I was like, I need to go from 28 to 34. Okay. I can't accept anything less than 34. This was back in like 2000. Okay. Just to give you a sense. And they offered me 32. And I could not accept that. I could not accept that. And that's scary to say, hey, I mean, it sounds like it's freaking $2,000. Who cares? But I did my research. I asked around. I knew I was getting a promotion, and I was really good at my job. And so I asked for more. And I said, hey, I've done some research. I know what this level, like what the range is, and I feel like I want to be at this level. And Tess, I was shamed by an email boss for asking people about their salaries.
Yeah.
So we might have received that message too. And I remember standing strong, though. I didn't apologize. I didn't say, oh, no, forget it. Just give me no, I held firm and I got the money.
That's amazing, by the way, that when you were that early in your career that you did that. That's pretty special.
Well, girl, it's survival at that point. Like, I couldn't make it. I made a deal with my parents. My first year, I said, if you could each give me $200, my parents were divorced. It's like, if you could just each give me $200 a month for my first year to help me get on my path. And they agreed. And then I knew that was going to be cut off. So it was either this happens or I can't be here anymore.
Right.
I wasn't done with my New York thing. And so survival and just knowing, a lot of it boils down to you're worth it. You are worth it. And this is a lot of this conversation, Tess, is that we're worth it. We are worth having money. We need this to live well. And you know what's great, Tess? And you've probably seen this in your work. As women, we give at higher levels than men. There's data to back that up in terms of how we contribute to charity, philanthropy, to causes that we're really passionate about. Like, we really make the world better with this wealth.
Yeah, it's so true. I think that is, well, that's kind of, if you think about like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I kind of think about the similar concept when it comes to money. And the first layer is security and safety, right? Like, we need money as a tool to walk away from a toxic situation, take care of ourselves, survive a divorce, whatever it is. Then there's the layer of optionality. You might have more options to leave and start a business or pivot or whatever, or take that trip that you really wanted to. And then the third level, which is so powerful, and this is how we change the world, is impact and influence. Mm-hmm. And when you have money, you're able to do that at such a higher degree. And so when anyone talks about money not buying happiness, or money, being greedy, or sometimes I share my net worth sometimes on social media more as, and honestly, it still feels uncomfortable for me.
Yeah, sure.
Meanwhile, like, dudes are doing it everywhere. They don't care. Yes. But for me, it still feels uncomfortable. And I am able to give back so much more to my community and to nonprofits and to causes that I care about in a way that I never imagined. And I can do that because I have money. Exactly. There's no bad side to having more money unless you use it for crappy reasons, right? Yeah. Like that's, money is just a tool. It's how you wield it that matters. And I wish more of us understood that. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, like, money matters, and more money in the hands of women is magic. And we need that to happen because that's how we make change. That's how we change policy. That's how we become more confident. That's how we educate each other. It's so important.
Yes, yes, yes. True words right there. That was poetry. Tess, how can people find out more about you, how they can learn from you, all the things? Tell us.
Sure. So I will share again, if you want to get started, if you're motivated to try to figure out where you are, the first thing I would do if you want to take control of your money is get clarity on what your financial independence number might be, which is the amount of money you need to make sure that you're able to retire comfortably eventually.
Mhm.
And so I have, like I mentioned, a calculator and a training for that. It's totally free. So if you go to wealthwithtest.com/FI, you can grab that training. There's also a free workshop in there. It's a great free resource to get started. So if you're motivated and you're like, I want to figure out more of this compound interest passive income thing, which you should, that's where you should go. So wealthwithtest.com/FI, and you can grab that calculator. And then if you want to learn more, I'm on it. I post a ton on Instagram, a lot of free education at Wealth with Tess, all one word, Wealth with Tess. And I also answer all my DMs. So reach out if you have questions. I love to chat. I'm genuinely, as I mentioned, at this point, morally obligated to help in any way I can. So if you have a question, even if I don't know the answer, I'll help find you someone that has it. All of us money enthusiasts hang out together. So
Yes, the money enthusiast. Yes, you are incredible. I thank you for your gifts and how you share them and how you really step into what you're here to do, from jumping off of diving boards on the Royal Caribbean cruise ships to really, what you're helping women do is jump into the deep end of wealth, and to recognize we can do this. We absolutely can do this. I adore you. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful that we met it was through Mia. So shout out to Mia Moran. And then we've met by way of our connections to Chief. And y'all check Tess out. Go to Tess's website, wealthwithtest.com/FI, and then certainly check her out on IG. Thank you all for being here. Let's get wealthy together. All right. More wealth in the hands of women is magic, as Tess said. This is Jenny Fennig for Coach Magic. I look forward to being with you again soon. Be well and wealthy. Bye, everyone.